for Dr. J.
We're inside of 83 again.
The weather is not hospitable.
No, it's not
Of
hospitable.
course, it's not raining right now, but it's been wet.
Yeah. Well, it's still drizzly out there. Not very conducive. So, the novel. This week we're going to talk about the novel.
This is your,
It's my bag.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
I visit from time to time.
from time to time.
I know what I like.
Right. Well, the reason why I thought about this is because, you know, you and I had a lengthy discussion last week off camera about Daniel Defoe.
Ah, yes, Willem Dafoe.
Yes, Willem Dafoe.
Daniel Defoe was also great in Platoon. He made it for me. I think the name of his character was Robinson Crusoe.
Okay, so we had to go through the history.
These two names trip me up every single. I have to stop and remind myself. Okay, it's not Willem Dafoe.
It's
Daniel Defoe.
Yes,
or vice versa.
Daniel, or vice versa, yes. All right.
Are we on camera?
Oh, shit.
I'm not even wearing my hat.
You'll be fine. So we were going to talk about the novel. And of course, you have to go through the history of it, right? You have to talk about the first one. It was, of course, Cervantes,
Yep.
Don Quixote, the birth
De la
of the
Mancha.
novel. Yes, De la Mancha. What movie is that? De la Mancha. Oh no, it was is the Newsroom.
Oh yeah.
She quotes the Broadway play. She says, "Miguel Cervantes." He was like, "No, it's the Broadway play." There was okay. So we'll get to that. We'll talk about that. I had a incident the other day with Peter Pan. I was in one of the stores downtown, and they had a little writing pad, had a little leather cover, and they had a quote: "To live would be an awfully big adventure." And then underneath it said Peter Pan. I'm like, no, that's not the quote. The quote is to die would be an awfully big adventure. So then I went home, went through the novel, and I'm like, I know I'm right. I realized it's not in the novel at all. It's in a movie. It's not even a Disney movie. It was 2000, like a 2003, 2004, somewhere in there, live action movie.
Is it Hook?
No, it's called Peter Pan. It's as soon as it went public domain, it was one of the movies that came out, and it was like Peter Pan, and it's closer to the novel than the Disney movie is, but they added stuff, and that's where the line comes from. The line is from the movie, and Hook has got him pinned down. He's getting ready to strike him, and he says, "No, you're going to die." And Peter says, "To die would be an awfully big adventure." I'm just sitting there looking at it. I was like, "You sons of bitches. You misquoted him, and then you didn't even misquote Barry. You misquoted the freaking movie." Oh, I was irritated.
Well, even before.
I was actually texting with somebody, and I was like, "This is bullshit."
I mean, you can trace back narrative prose.
I can't believe I didn't tell you about it. Oh, I think you were out with your choir master.
You can trace back narrative prose or prose narratives to the Bible, and then book length narratives, which are what we think of as kind of like novels, would be the Greeks and the Romans.
Right.
There are Roman novels, but to think in terms of what
Well, then we
would call
also
them.
have the epic poems, right?
We do, but I mean, just in terms of pure prose,
Yeah.
right? And that's the distinguishing
Right.
feature, right? It's
Cervantes,
prose.
yep. Cervantes did the full blown prose.
That's right.
Um,
It's the beginning of the modern novel as we know it.
It is. And then and Defoe's not the next one, but there was a French author, I can't remember their name, and then there was, Christine de Pizan is in there. She wrote the book The City of Ladies
Right.
during that period. So it's one of the early novels. But then you get to Defoe, and Defoe changes the way we think about the novel.
Yeah.
Well, it's the first change because there are several different milestones throughout the history of the novel that we see these books come out and they change the way we think about the novel. And Defoe, specifically Moll Flanders. You don't have a problem with the novel. You got a problem with the girl.
Well, I think a lot of people who don't hate the novel have a problem with her
I love her.
because she's just so stupid. I mean, I mean, the story it repeats itself.
Mm-hmm.
Meet a guy, has sex with guy, turns out to be bad guy, steals from her, leaves her. Having not learned her lesson, meets another guy. Rinse and repeat.
Yeah. And get stranded in America.
And get stranded in
Don't
America.
forget, 30, 40 pages of the novel is just her stranded in America and her daughter comes looking for her. That's how, don't you remember? It's like this huge section of the novel where she disappears. And the daughter comes looking for her and finds her in America. Because she starts, here's isn't it, correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while.
I was in college when I read this last.
I think the daughter falls in love with her half-brother, and that's how she finds Moll.
Because that's not at all weird.
No.
If nothing else in Defoe, shit gets real fast. Like, it doesn't take long for shit to get real.
And she ends up dying alone, broke.
Yep.
It's actually a really sad story.
No, it's
but
awful.
It's so good. But the fundamental problem that Jason always points out that I just overlook because I just love the book so much. There are no chapters.
Well, Defoe didn't believe in chapters.
Well, they didn't know to write chapters.
Because there are times where you think, okay, this would be a really good place. Because it's Moll Flanders is episodic. And so the chapter breaks seem obvious to a contemporary reader or modern reader.
Right, but for them,
it didn't matter. And obviously there have been novelists since then who've played with it. Beckett wrote entire novels without chapters, and I'm perfectly okay with that.
Right.
But in Beckett, there's no place for a chapter.
Right.
Whereas in Defoe, there are places where you could do it. And they had precedents for long poems that had chapters, like Paradise Lost, for example, and Defoe would have been very familiar with it.
Yeah.
But it just, because it was in its infancy, it just never occurred to anybody that we can break this up. And clearly, I don't know who the first is.
Yeah.
It might be Swift, who says,
well, okay,
let's
so
do
what
this.
Swift did with Gulliver's Travels,
which is a great novel.
Because each one, he didn't they're not chapter numbers, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going off memory here. There's no chapter numbers, they're titles.
That's right.
That's how he broke it up.
And that's fine.
Because each episode is a comment on the British government.
Yeah. He realized what Defoe didn't, that these things are discrete units. Yeah. We can break it up and it makes more sense. I think Moll Flanders is very hard to read because, and the same with Robinson Crusoe, it's hard to read because
it just never stops.
It never stops. And for a reader, it's like, where do I put this down? Because I've got to go do stuff. And you just keep going. Like, whenever I read Moll Flanders for the first time, I was terribly naive. I'm like, we're going to get there. It's going to happen. I read the entire book in one sitting because I couldn't find a place to stop. So I just like, nope, I got to keep going. 6 hours later.
6 hours later.
Oh my God. And around 2.5 hours, I'm like, there are no chapters.
I did that with All the King's Men. Only it has chapters, but I had like 9 hours to read it, and I read it in 7.
It's massive too.
Massive.
Did you wait till the last minute to read it?
Was I in grad school?
Yes. Of course you did.
Yeah. I didn't have to write a paper that week. It wasn't my week to write a paper. So I was like, I can put it off. It was like, oh, shit. I gotta leave. And I haven't started this book.
You're lucky it was a great book.
Yeah.
But we've skipped ahead several hundred years.
Yeah, we'll go backwards. We'll pick back up. So yeah. Well, then you have like, okay, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. I think it's Stern, who wrote The Sentimental Journey.
It is.
He used chapters.
He did.
And what he's doing is he is making fun of all the sentimental literature that's happening between the poetry, the drama, the short prose.
Yep.
Oh, we got to talk about Afra. Because
Yep.
Orinoco, even though Orinoco is not a novel,
It's a novella.
it's a novella, and she did use chapters. She broke it up into parts. So, and then of course, like I said, Stern. Is it Lawrence? No, it's not Lawrence Stern. That's like a modern celebrity, but I can't remember his first name, but it was
What's
Stern.
the name of the book?
The Sentimental Journey. He's going to Google it.
I'll do it right here. Look, when in doubt.
Yeah. Google it out.
It'd help if I spelled it correctly, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
We can do this later. I
Yeah.
don't care.
We can.
I just don't care.
I'm pretty sure that his last name is Stern.
But I don't
anyway,
remember his first name. That's what's bothering me.
But yeah, he it was he was poking fun at sentimental literature. So you get your first piece of not cynicism, but your first
Parody.
parody, yeah.
And it's in chapters.
I actually had to do a not a report. I had to do a book report. I had to present it to my graduate class.
How'd that go?
Oh, I messed it up. I botched it.
Did the professor get on you about it?
No, she asked me. There's this one part in the book. This freaking bird lands on his windowsill. It's like a little yellow canary type bird. And he goes on for like 2 pages about this fucking bird. He's talking about how the bird understands life on levels that I can't understand. Look at how I sit and marvel at its beauty. The way its beak curved. And then he's just going on and on about this damn bird.
You misread it.
No, I didn't misread it. It's just the way I delivered it. And she was just like, oh my God. I said, this is something along the lines of like, let's see one more bird in this book.
You said that? Did she laugh?
She, no, everybody else did. She didn't. This is the one that gave me a B.
Oh.
Yeah, for that, for the Swift Dickens paper where I said Swift and Dickens were having a conversation over time. And I used City Shower and Mono's Proposal and one section of Gulliver's Travels. And then I used Hard Times, Oliver Twist. I can't remember the third book. Most of my stuff came from Hard Times because the way he just describes Coketown, you know.
She didn't like it.
Here's what. Okay, so we're getting off subject, but I don't care. So
Keep talking while I look this up, because I got to know. It's going to bother me.
she made us workshop our papers with her. So we had to go in, and she had to go over our drafts with us. So she went over my outline. She went over my drafts. She went over my research. I found all kinds of awesome newspaper articles during both Swift and Dickens times, right?
Right.
Talking about the things that they're talking about in those pieces.
Right.
But then, and so she basically walked me through this essay and gave me a B.
That sucks.
I was so mad. I was very angry.
Do you think you deserved to be?
I don't know. I haven't gone back and reread the paper. I was so mad.
Lawrence Stern.
Lawrence Stern. It was Lawrence Stern.
You were right.
I was right.
It was Lawrence.
It didn't sound right. It sounded like, some stupid anchor on CNN.
Or it was on his own radio show.
Yeah. This is the Lawrence Stern Show.
I'm filling in for Howard. Sentimental Journey, written by Howard Stern. That could be his memoir.
There you go. An unsentimental journey. So then you get past that, and like I said, we're talking about Afra Ben. She...
This is going back to the Restoration.
Yeah. So, the Restoration is where you start to see the next shift, right? Because women are starting to publish more by the Restoration. I mean, Afra is one of many, right? Because that old cliche of linking the arts to prostitution is starting to break down under Charles, under Chuck. Chuck the Two.
Chuck Part 2.
Chuck Part 2. So, we Chuck Part 2. But we see Afra with Orinoco.
Yes.
Which is, okay, so this is something that I've actually argued for a while now. She gave birth to the slave narrative. Because if you look at the structure of Orinoco,
it's built like a slave narrative.
And then the slave narratives come after.
Yep.
And they start, because she's got a middle passage.
Well, yeah,
She's got the revelation.
She's also playing with travel narratives.
Yeah.
And I explain this to my students when I teach it, is that there's an industry, a cottage industry in Europe at the time of travel narratives, because most people couldn't afford to travel, but they could afford to read a book about people going to the New World.
Yeah.
So she's playing with different genres in this book,
right?
Which is pretty exciting stuff, which is why it's such a great book.
And inventing a new one.
And inventing a new one. I think rather unintentionally inventing a new one.
Yeah, I don't think she set out to say, I'm going to make the slave narrative.
No.
No.
She stumbled into it.
Yeah. But they took it and ran with it.
They did.
Because is it Equiano, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that writes in the 1780s.
I think so.
Remarkable Narrative of Equiano. And that was called something like that. Remarkable, or I can't remember. But yeah, he's writing in the 1780s. And he's got the same structure she's got. And then of course you fast forward to the slave narratives that are coming out in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. They're all following her structure too. I mean, to a T.
Yep.
So yeah, it's pretty.
Well, what's exciting about Orinoco? I could probably talk about this a lot, but I won't. But what's exciting about that book is, well, we've got so many more to cover in about 45 minutes, but because we haven't, because when we get to the modern novel is when I get really excited.
Well, it should be the 19th century.
I love the 19th century novel, but I told you when I went to grad school, I made a choice that I would not study the thing I loved the most because I wanted to continue to love it.
Right.
And what I love the most is modernism.
Yeah.
And so the modernist novel gets me all churned up.
Modernist novels, perfect.
It's perfect.
Anyway.
Well, and some postmodern fiction too.
Yeah.
We got to talk about DeLillo at the end, right?
Well, yeah, and Vonnegut.
And Vonnegut. But what makes Orinoco such an interesting story is that she starts with him before he's a slave.
Yeah.
You see him being enslaved, and you see him broken by this European system. That it finally kills him.
Yeah.
That in itself is, I mean, he disembowels himself and still doesn't die. Oh. Ugh. So yeah, I don't think you can oversell it as being the first novella.
No, not at all. So we fast forward and we get into the French, because there's this period from the late 17th into the 18th century where there's not a lot of novels being written in the Anglophile sense.
Yeah.
But the French have this explosion.
Yeah.
Because during that period, you're starting to see the roots of what's going to eventually become, or come out of that. What's going to eventually come out of that is, of course, the Victor Hugos, the Alexander Dumas, all in the early 19th century. But during that period, you see this explosion of French literature. It's exciting.
It is.
It's amazing stuff too. But like I said, it's laying the groundwork for these massive figures that are going to come later.
Yeah.
With Hugo, and I mean, obviously Dumas, he's a one-trick pony, but Hugo's not.
He wrote the same novel over and over and over again.
Yeah, basically. Just like, here, pick them up and put them 10 years later.
Thankfully, they're good books.
What is it? So it was Three Musketeers, and then 10 years later, then 20 years later, and then Count of Monte Cristo? No, Man in the Iron Mask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're good books.
Yeah.
They stand up.
Yeah.
But they're pot boilers.
Yeah.
And he's writing with an obvious formula in mind.
Yeah. Hugo is not.
No, Hugo's another matter.
He
writes Les Mis, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, what a book. That is a fantastic novel. The musical doesn't get half the novel.
It can't.
It's sad.
It can't.
That novel is just... The opening sequence is like almost 100 pages before you finally get to Jean Valjean getting to Paris with Colette, or Cassette, right?
It's also a massive novel, so
it's huge.
You can't cover it all.
I mean, you go through this whole thing where, at the very beginning, he's robbing this guy, getting all, stealing all this guy's silver and everything, and he's just got down, then he goes to jail, he gets out of jail, and that's when he ends up with Cassette. I mean, it's just like, the opening sequence of setting up for what's going to come later in the novel when the revolution hits. That's another thing. So, I keep jumping ahead, so we need to go back. So there's that period, but then you get to... This is where my expertise comes in. You get to the end of the 18th century, and you have these two prominent writers on this side of the Atlantic who are trying... Well, she's not. He's trying. Charles Brockton Brown.
Yeah. I knew you were going to mention him.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to talk about what was Twain called the literary offenses of James Fenimore Cooper.
Vomitous reading. He was a terrible novelist. He was horrible.
Natty Bumpkin.
There is nothing about him that's any good. The only thing that made him good was Daniel Day-Lewis, and that was only for 2 hours. I fucking hate James Fenimore Cooper. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him.
So anyway, Charles Brockton Brown, this is the cute thing about Brockton Brown. He decides he's going to be he was an apprentice for something. Some kind of manual labor. He decides he's going to be a writer. He's going to make a living as an author. He's going to sell novels. He got in his head he could sell novels. Again, this is the 1790s.
No one's reading this shit.
Nobody's reading novels in the 1790s. Well, they are. We'll get to her in a minute. So he writes 6 novels. The 2 best are Edgar Huntley and Wieland.
Yes.
Oh, God, what book? Those books are phenomenal. They're really good, but he can't get going. And it's hilarious because he finally gives up. He dies in 1817, something like that, the second decade. And then 10 years later, comes this punk out of Massachusetts who says, I'm going to be a novelist. It doesn't work out for him either. And yet we still talk about him as if he's one of the best, but because he is. We'll get to that. So then at the same time he's doing that, of course, oh God, what is her name? Rosen. Mary Rosen.
Mary Rowlandson.
Not Rowlandson. Rosen. Rowesen. Rosen.
I don't know this person.
She writes Charlotte Temple.
That's her. Oh.
And the thing about Charlotte Temple, and this is what blew my mind in grad school, and then I tell my students about this because I give them the last 3 or 4 chapters of Charlotte Temple. It is the worst sentimental crap in the world. It is the ultimate grocery store novel. But from published in 1791. 1791 to 1903. 1903. It's the #1 selling book in America. It's in 1903 that Uncle Tom's Cabin surpasses it. Now, of course, we're not counting the Bible. We're talking about fiction. #1 selling book from 1791 to 1903. When Uncle Tom's Cabin finally passes it.
Which is also a piece of shit.
And it is the most... Charlotte Temple is the most god-awful book in the world. It's just so bad.
But you assign it.
Yeah, the same reason why they assign it to us. Because you read it, and then the question is, why? So here's the story. I'll give you a brief Uncle Brian's Story Hour. I'll give you a brief so you don't have to go out and buy the book and waste your time
because
with this
you should
crap.
never read it.
You should never read it.
Yeah, you make your students read it.
Absolutely. I make them read the last 3 or 4 chapters, yeah.
And they hate it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we make fun of it. So it's a lesson in comedy. So it's sentimental crap. Okay. So there's this young lady named Charlotte Temple. She's born and raised in London. They send her off to a girls' boarding school. Okay? The headmistress that is over her, well, not headmistress, but the mistress who's over her, let's just say she's more akin to Maul Flanders than she is anybody else. She can't keep her legs closed.
The mistress?
The mistress. The school mistress. We're not talking about mistresses and her daddy's friend.
No.
We're talking about the school mistress, the woman who's supposed to be watching over these girls.
So she was promiscuous.
She's promiscuous. She runs into these guys. One of the fellas takes a liking to Charlotte. And so between the 2 of them, they corrupt. As the novel puts it, they corrupt poor Charlotte.
This sounds like shit.
Oh my God, it gets so much worse. So, of course, he sleeps with her, convinces her that she needs to come with him to America. So her and the mistress, the fellas, up on a boat and come to America. On the way over, we realize Charlotte's got a baby bump.
Oh, he got her pregnant.
He got her pregnant. So they get to America, and he solves his dilemma, as Rosen puts it. He puts her up in this cabin in the woods. Way out in the middle. Well, okay, in the book it's way out in the middle of nowhere, but it's 2 miles outside of New York City. Okay? So she's probably in Queens. So She's not that far out, right? But he puts her up in this cabin and just leaves her there. Every once in a while, he has this one servant girl that comes out and gives her food every once in a while she's working through her 9 months.
That's horrible.
It gets even worse. Rumors start to go through the town, New York, because he's upper society. He can't let these rumors be found out. So he sends a guy to go down to the cabin and lure her to having sex with him, so that then he can say, she cheated on me. The guy ends up raping her.
This is described in the book.
Yeah. Goes back to New York to tell him that the deed is done. Washes his hands of her. Stops sending food to her. Just leaves her out there to die.
What a dick.
And she's still pregnant. So then, I told you, this is an awful novel. It gets to the point where she's starving, the baby's coming, and of course, there's snow on the ground. And by this point, Charlotte has lost her shoes, so she hikes barefoot.
She's lost her shoes.
Snow to New York. She ends up in New York. She goes to the mistress's house, who has now married into money. The mistress acts like she doesn't know who she is and turns her away. One of her servants takes pity on her. He realizes this girl's onto something. Something's not right here. So he takes pity on her, puts her up in his 2-room shack with his wife and kids, where she delivers the baby. Now, miraculously, while all this is happening, her father comes over from London looking for her.
Just happens to be looking.
And he catches wind that she's in this little 2-room shack. And so he comes in, he gets to see Charlotte. Charlotte's happy to see her father. He gets to meet the baby. Charlotte hands him the baby. He dies.
The baby dies?
No.
The father dies?
No. Charlotte dies.
Charlotte dies when she hands him the baby? Like, just right there on the spot?
She hands him the baby. She says, like, some kind of stupid sentimental crap, and then she's dead.
Is that how the book ends?
No. There's another chapter. So then he takes the kid back to London. There is a sequel called Lucy Temple, and I've never had the courage to read this book. Because if it's half as bad as the first one, it's awful. So he goes back to London with the kid, where he and his wife are going to raise the kid. Fast forward a couple of years, and he and his wife and the child, who's now toddling, are passing by this monastery or something, some kind of building where there's steps, and the homeless people gather on the steps and beg for food. And there's the mistress.
Begging for food.
Yeah.
So she got her comeuppance.
Carmen got her in the butt.
Is that how the book ends?
That's how the book ends. The book ends with the father, the mother, and the granddaughter walking away from her. Because she begs forgiveness for him, and he doesn't answer. He just turns and walks off. That is Charlotte frickin' Temple.
That
the number one selling book in America from 1791 to 1903.
It sounds like a piece of shit.
It is. I told you, it is the ultimate grocery store novel trash.
Why is it so popular in this time?
That's why we keep reading it. We're trying to figure it out. We still don't know, Jason. Because it's just crap. No, what a lot of scholars think is it's because it teaches a good moral lesson. Because remember, here's the thing, this book really starts to take off in the early 19th century. between
Great Awakening.
1810 and 1830,
Yeah.
during the Great Awakenings,
Yep.
and during the establishment of the Republican woman and the true woman, right? So you're seeing all this propaganda coming down the pike. In the urban areas, it's true woman. In the rural areas, it's the Republican woman, and they're pushing this moral, upstanding woman who lives by the Bible, by the Word. And so Charlotte Temple is the ultimate example of what happens when you strip. You step away. You'll end up dying barefoot in a 2-room shack.
After having walked there in the snow. Because somehow, without any explanation whatsoever,
She lost her
you lost your
shoes.
shoes. Were her shoes stolen?
I don't know.
It's just suddenly she doesn't have any shoes.
It's at the end of the book.
So she is barefoot and pregnant. That's the worst
In the
cliche
snow.
ever.
In the snow, Jason.
So what you're saying is I shouldn't read this book.
No, nobody should. It's a curse that I had to read it multiple times.
I'd never heard of this book before until you. I wish I hadn't have heard
It's because
the
you
plot
didn't take
summary.
you didn't go into American Lit, you went into British Lit. There's probably books that you know. Like, you probably don't know The Silent Partner, right? Mm-hmm. Silent Partner is a book that came out in 1820s, I want to say. No, it's later than that. I think it's around the 1840s or 50s, 1840s or 50s. This is during the early years of New England industrialization. Okay? And what The Silent Partner is about is this, there's this huge factory, right? And this old man owns it and he dies. And the only heir is his daughter. Like, the wife is dead, he had a son and the son is dead, and so she's the only one who can inherit it. Well, there's a problem with that, because if you know anything about property laws, in America during the 19th century, women couldn't own it outright. But there's no male heir to co-sign. So what they do in the book is, in order for her to keep her stake, they make her a silent partner in the company in exchange for them co-signing for her to keep the property. And that's why it's called the silent partner. What ends up happening is while that's happening, you go through several different, not insurrections, but several different riots where they're striking, where the workers are striking, and she's trying to get the workers the things that they want.
Right.
And the board, like, flexes this muscle, basically slaps her down. So it's kind of like, it's along the same lines of Ruth Hall, where it's exposing the injustices of the current property system within America.
Is it a good book?
It is actually a pretty decent book. It's much better than Charlotte Temple.
Yeah, I know Victorian novels you probably don't know, obviously, because I did the thing, but I know American poetry inside and out like that. Even the early stuff, just because it was my ballywick.
Your wheelhouse?
My cup of tea.
Your cup of tea. Your wheelhouse. All right, so
We can now move out of the 18th century.
we can get out of the 18th, because you get into the 19th century and all of a sudden things change. And one thing we haven't talked about is, so the printing press makes the novel possible.
Yes.
The advancement of the printing press in the 19th century makes mass copies
It
possible.
makes it popular.
Yes. The problem is that nobody really figured out how to successfully make it lucrative. Because what they were doing, they all tried what Brockton Brown tried. They all tried to just write the novel and sell the novel, right?
No one had thought to serialize it yet.
Exactly. Hawthorne.
Yeah.
Hawthorne is trying to sell the novel. That's, when I said that young man from Massachusetts. Yeah. He could. All of his success came from his short stories, where he was running them in periodicals, right? Somewhere in the 1840s, we start to see female writers serializing stories. Now, it's not like Dickens. We're going to get to Dickens because Dickens is the next pivotal moment, right? And then right behind him is Twain.
Well, also pivotal is how they're marketing novels in England, which is through those lending libraries that I can talk about in a minute.
Yeah. Well, and then when you look at Twain, the pivotal moment for him are the decorative coffee table books.
That's right.
Right? Which actually does more for the binding industry than anybody else because they made some serious advances to get those books out. But anyway, but the women are serializing stories, not intending to be a novel. But what the people at home are doing is they're collecting the pieces and then they're binding them themselves. So like the biggest example of that is The Hidden Hand with Capitola, right? Where she serialized this story over like 4 years. And what they were doing is they were collecting the chapters from their periodicals, keeping them, and then once she finally ended the story in the periodicals, they bound them. And it made Capitola one of the most popular baby names from like 1820 to 1860 because of that damn book.
I think serialization got off the ground faster in England than it did in America. What they did in the Victorian era, and we didn't talk about Jane Austen, and I'm okay with that, so let's keep going. So just putting that out there.
We need to talk about Jane.
We should talk about her before we talk about the Victorians.
Yeah.
Because the Victorians can't write the novels they're writing without Jane Austen.
That's true.
As much as it pains me to say out loud.
Exactly, and I'm hurting too.
Because I hate her so much.
I know. I don't hate her.
I know you've got a friend who really likes her, but...
Yeah, but I'm not a big fan. I don't hate her. I could live life without her. Jane Austen.
I like Emma.
Right.
And I like Pride and Prejudice. It's just once you've read one of her novels, you've read them all.
Pride and Prejudice and Zombies is my favorite.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
She broke the bank on science fiction with that one.
Yeah. Too bad it happened 200 years after she was dead.
Or Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters.
Yes. I don't know who wrote those books, but they're fantastic. It's the best way to digest her. But she writes these wonderful society novels.
She does. Well, and if you fast forward to the end of the 19th century, Edith Wharton owes her career to Jane Austen.
She does. What makes Austen so cool, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, what makes her so cool is that women actually do have power.
Yeah.
They have to work within societal norms to achieve what they want.
Well, and look at Louisa May Alcott. She's pulling from that, too.
Oh, God, there's no Louisa May Alcott without Jane Austen.
Yeah, well, I was talking the other day about how, what's interesting about Little Women is you have both dichotomies, and they're fighting.
Yes.
Because Jo is the strong, independent woman.
That's right.
And then you have, what is the sister's name that gets married?
Oh, fuck, I don't remember. But
she falls in line to society. And, of course, the question is, who's going to be happier? And you know the answer.
Yeah.
It's going to be Jo.
Yeah.
But where's she getting this idea from?
Austen.
Yeah. They're all pulling from that.
They are. Austen's groundbreaking.
Yeah.
I just don't... I think she's great. I just don't enjoy reading her. I think there's a distinction there.
The really big problem, if I really broke it down, I could argue semantics about her language all day long, but that's not really a good reason not to like her. The real reason I don't like her, she's the one that introduced this fucking idea of having a marriage at the end of the novels.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the rest of the 19th century, you had to have a marriage at the end of the novels, which is why when you look at The Scarlet Letter and Ruth Hall, they're groundbreaking because both authors refused.
Yep.
The marriage at the end.
And Dickens often did too.
Yeah.
He said, but even when there were marriages, they never quite went off the way you'd expect.
No. And the real tragedy of Great Expectations is Pip is alone at the end.
Yes.
He's not with her.
No, there's the father. It's about the best novelist in the English language.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there.
Yeah, I'm eager.
Because we got to finish with Hawthorne. Because, of course, Hawthorne, like I said, his career was built on the short stories because he didn't serialize.
Yeah.
He tried to do everything in one fell swoop. And he complained that famous letter to Ticknor and Fields. Damn scribbling women. I could be a lot more successful if it wasn't for all these damn scribbling women. What were they doing? They were all serializing. He wasn't. That was the problem. But then you have Fanny Fern come along and blow that wide open with her collection of articles, Fern Leaves for Fanny's Friends, and then Ruth Hall. Both of them were immensely successful. But then you have Melville, who writes a novel that's so far over America's heads, it takes us almost 100 years to realize this is a pretty good book.
It's not until the 1920s.
Yeah. When the Academy rediscovered it. Because it was too smart for us.
I mean, he wrote a couple novels that people really liked.
Yeah.
And then he wrote Moby Dick.
Type
and they
E.
said enough. Type E and White Jacket.
Yep.
And then after that, they're like, yeah, fuck you.
Yeah. What's this with the whale? What's going on?
We're done.
Yeah. Is Ahab an Arab? That was wrong. I'm sorry.
It's a little Roy Stevenson.
Yeah.
Ray Stevens.
Ray Stevens.
Ray Stevens.
No. And then you get to the mid-19th century. And there he is. Old Chuck.
I'm going to let you do most of the talking about him, but I have very strong opinions about him because he proves that you can be a novelist and be a rock star at the same time.
Yeah.
He really does.
Well, and the way I explain it to my students, this is where, we were talking about different key moments in the history of the novel. This is the big explosion. This is the moment where the author, as we understand it, is born.
Yep.
Before that, the author, as we understand it, didn't exist. Like your Stephen Kings, your Tom Clancy's, that kind of guy. Those people didn't exist.
No.
Dickens comes along, changes the game.
Yes.
2 reasons why. Number 1, he was a visionary. He understood serialization is key. Secondly, he was a workhorse.
He wrote all the time.
Non-stop. He would have 2 or 3 going at the same time in different periodicals.
Yep.
And it was you that pointed out, there are many tales of him having a dinner party, be in one room writing, and having a conversation with everybody else in the other room while he's writing.
Yep. He was sick. He also knew exactly how many handwritten words on a page would equal a type page so he could write for the money.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't stupid.
No. And he wrote some of the greatest novels ever written.
But it's the lending library and serialization combined that really sell it. So the novels would have been first serialized, and then they were published in what were called 3-decker novels. Mm-hmm. They were always in 3 volumes because the Victorians liked massive 700-800 page novels. They couldn't get enough of them. So families would actually rent them.
Right.
And take volume 1 home while somebody else took volume 2 while someone else took volume 3. But the idea, the serializing aspect, you learn how popular Dickens is when you hear these great anecdotes. My dissertation advisor told us he had just finished writing the last chapters of The Old Curiosity Shop, and they were serialized, and the British ships carrying the copies of these books are on their way, and they run into a ship on the way coming from America, and they ask them, does Little Nell die in the end? These are illiterate seamen who can't get enough of Dickens. They get to New York Harbor, and the magazine sells out on the harbor. They can't even get it to booksellers. That's how popular he was. There is no writer in the English language
It was more popular.
He was more, and I don't care. There's nobody.
Yeah.
There is nobody like him to have that kind of effect on people. And he's writing about social issues. Mm-hmm. He's talking about hard truths about the way people live. He's writing about the poor. Mm-hmm. He's a part of a movement called the Condition of England novel, which is why you read things like Great Expectations. He's talking about poverty.
Yeah.
And it's because he grew up poor. So he sees it.
Well, look at where Pip's money comes from.
Yeah.
criminal.
That's right. He's wonderful. He's probably, and I don't think I'm overselling
And
it.
Hard Times is all about
And his characters.
Yeah.
The names of his characters. Grind. Best name ever.
I still love Miss Havisham.
Miss Havisham's great.
Yeah.
No one is better at creating character names than him.
No.
In fact, no one's better than him.
He's the atomic bomb
Yeah.
that wipes everything out and we start over.
Yeah.
And Twain's the first one to pick up after Dickens. Because what Twain did was equally as impressive.
Twain had to have loved Dickens.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's
I
no
have
way
no
he
proof
didn't.
of that, but it seems
There's no way he
obvious.
didn't. Yeah.
Because he's writing about the same social issues as Dickens was,
Mm-hmm.
except in America.
No, I'm sorry. It's only those two. I'm sorry.
But no, Twain. Okay, so where Twain rocks is the promoting of the books. As I was pointing out, they got this idea of doing these because most of the people in rural areas were illiterate. So they sold these decorative books for their coffee tables. They're not reading these books.
No.
That's how Twain changed the world. But like I said earlier, it forces binding technology to advance rapidly to keep up with this because they're not small books. These things are it's the family Bible size.
Yeah.
So they got to crank them out. So yeah, there's huge there. But then you have so now we're getting towards the end of the 19th century, get into the 20th century. Two massive things happen: the pocketbook, which is the dime store novel, right? And then the no, God, what's it called? You know what I'm talking about? The dime store novel, which is the nickel, the dime novel.
The Penny Dreadfuls.
Yeah, the pocketbook, right?
Yeah.
And then what's the second? Anyway, so that changes everything, right? Because now they're going back through the classics, and they're starting to figure out ways to abridge them so they can fit them into this size, right? Oh, the noir novels of the 30s,
Oh, yeah.
right? Which are largely California,
Yes.
right? Specifically LA. Double Indemnity, Maltese Falcon.
Yeah. No, that's a
Postman
great. Maltese Falcon is a great book.
Yeah. Postman Orange Rings Twice.
Yeah.
Those
Big
are
Sleep.
Yeah, The Big Sleep. These are all phenomenal books. What they do, though, for the genre is they start to focus on the darker side. Right? And of course, at the same time as all this is happening, you have the high modernist period happening at the same time. You're talking about the modernist novel. You start with the 1880s, 1890s here in America, where you see the rise of Chopin and Horton and Sandberg and who wrote Winesburg, Ohio? What is his name? Oh, God.
I know. And it's
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah. I mean, Hemingway loved him. Sherwood
Anderson.
Yep.
Yep.
But then also at the same time, you're starting to see the regional novels, Willa Cather, William Faulkner. All the regional writers are starting to pop up, right? Baron Graham comes out during that period. It's like 1895 or 6, right? That's a phenomenal book. Ellen Glasgow. The agrarians are starting to pop up.
Yep.
They're starting to write. So all this cultural bubbling is happening on both coasts. Of course, you've got the New York writers, Dos Passos, Fitzgerald before he leaves, right? And of course, in the 20s, everybody lands in Paris.
Yep.
Stupid Dubliner named fucking James Joyce. That goddamn book.
Some of the most important books published in the 20th century.
I know. Ulysses was,
In 1922, as a matter of fact.
yeah.
It and The Wasteland in the same damn year.
1922, you get that in the Wasteland. 1925, you get Gatsby. 1926, you get The Sun Also Rises. 24 was Sound the Fury.
Pretty sure.
And then Absalom is 32.
Yep.
The USA Trilogy comes out in... Okay, so the 42nd Parallel lands in the late 30s, mid-30s, 34, 35, somewhere in there. And then 1919, and then The Big Money is the last one. And they hit, bam, bam, bam. Manhattan Transfer came out in 24, 25, somewhere in there. Same year as Gatsby. It's 25.
What's so exciting about the novel, and it's not true of all of them, it's certainly not true for for Faulkner, is that they pick up where Twain and Dickens leave off by using language that is truly contemporary.
Yeah.
If you go to France in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, in Ireland, in France, you're getting into Sartre and Camus and Beckett. And what Camus does is that there's a tense in French called the passé simple. Only it's a written tense. It's never spoken. It's only in literature. And Camus said, "Wow, that's really stupid. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the passé composé, which is what we talk in."
Right.
And the novel becomes completely contemporary. Completely contemporary. It's like they realized, Twain and Dickens have done it. Let's revive that, right? I mean, and Hemingway does it.
Well, okay, so let's talk about the impact of the novel post-modern.
Yes.
Specifically, starting with Orwell.
Yes.
Because in 1984, he creates an entire language.
Yes.
And then what you see is Burgess later.
Oh, God.
Burgess with Clockwork Orange, he creates an entire sub-dialect.
He does. Viddy.
Yeah. And the thing is, he doesn't tell you what the words are. You just have to figure it out.
And by and large, it's not that hard.
It's not that hard because he repeats them. So you start to see the context and how they actually move within the context.
It's a brilliant book.
Genius. Yeah, it's genius. And then, of course, over here, you got Joseph Heller and Kurt Vonnegut. Heller with Catch 22.
Yes.
And then Vonnegut first with Mother Night, which, he wrote Galapagos and Sirens of Titan first. But then Mother Night kind of like shakes everybody up, and then Cat's Cradle just blows the lid off. And then, of course, within a decade, we get Slaughterhouse-Five. But then we fast forward to the 1980s, and the bomb goes off again. Another left turn, right, with White Noise. God, what a book!
You skipped one, and I know why you did, and I got to bring it up, Brian. You know what it is. You already know. It starts with a G and ends with a Ravity's Rainbow.
Ravity's Rainbow. I hate that book.
And in the 1970s.
I hate that book.
Was it 1970s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gravity's Rainbow.
It changed everything, too.
It did. Well, there are
a handful of books that do that.
That just rattled the cage, right?
That book, yeah.
Yeah.
It and White Noise.
Yeah. I think White Noise more so. I think the problem with Gravity's Rainbow, and I learned this in grad school, is that graduate students got a hold of it. That's the problem with Gravity's Rainbow, and they ruined it. Whereas they didn't do that with White Noise. You can't ruin White Noise. Because the problem with White Noise is it pokes fun at them ruining White Noise.
Well, and the other thing about the postmodern novel is it makes fun of itself as a genre.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes fun of art.
Mm-hmm.
What's the quote you like from White Noise so much? About cereal boxes.
The cereal, yeah. We've got, I understand, how does he put it? I understand art in movies and art in music, and I understand we have professors here that study television series and all these different movements, but what I don't understand is that we have full professors here who study cereal boxes, and the response is, it's the only avant-garde we've got. It is the best fucking quote ever. Oh, the best avant-garde we've got, because everything has been commercialized.
Everything, including the novel. We've only talked about more serious novels, but
Yeah.
there are a lot of pop writers.
Yeah, you cannot deny Stephen King.
No.
Carrie, and we were actually talking about this the other day, Carrie's going to end up in the canon. It's going to happen. There are going to be someone somewhere down the road is going to be teaching a graduate class on Carrie. It's going to happen. And if it's not Carrie, it's going to be Pet Sematary or It.
Yep.
It's going to be one of the early ones. Or Salem's Lot. But my money's on Carrie, because Carrie is ripe for it. We also haven't talked about the bridge novels, like the ones that kind of bridge over the two different movements, right? Heart of Darkness,
Yeah.
Joseph Conrad.
Early modernism.
Yeah.
Early.
But it's bridging between
Yeah.
the early modern and Edwardian movements.
Yep.
It's got that dark, sinister feel to it.
And it's colonial. And that's one of the things that makes that book so problematic, because Conrad is all about colonialism.
Then you look at Remains of the Day. It's a bridge between modernism and postmodernism.
Yep.
The greatest ending to any book is Atonement.
That's a
That
postmodern book.
That's a postmodern book, but that last chapter pisses you off so bad. The only book that comes close to pissing you off that much is Cat's Cradle, where you realize the ruse. Even though he tells you at the beginning, none of this is real.
So it reminds me of the beginning of Lolita, when the psychiatrist warns you. He's like, "Look, this guy's a con.
Yeah.
He's really charismatic. Be careful.
You're going to like him.
Don't get sucked in. You're gonna like him." And son of a bitch, you start rooting for this pedophile. You want him to succeed. It's like, and then you stop yourself. You're like, "This is disgusting. I really want this guy to sleep with this 10-year-old girl. What is my problem? I mean, oh my God, this is horrible."
This is bad.
But he makes you feel that way.
Yeah.
And that's a bridge book too. That's early postmodernist work.
So the one that, the one I'm a massive advocate for that not a lot of people know about is Lamb.
Christopher
Moore. And that came out during the height of the neocon movement, when Jesus was, the buddy Jesus from Dogma. The buddy Christ. That comes out during that period. It's so good.
I'm wondering what the future of the novel is now. I'm wondering if people are still reading it.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder what they're reading.
That will be a good question. We'll find out in about 20 years when those kids get to college. That's the other thing that we didn't talk about, is the rise of the tweenie novel.
Yeah.
Because that's happened within the last 30 years.
To the tween novel and the young adult novel.
Yeah. Well, that's the tweenie novel, right?
Yeah.
The Harry Potter was not the first, but it's the most popular.
Well, it started out that way. It did not end that way.
No.
It got dark really fast too. Like those books progressively get darker and darker the older these kids get.
Yeah.
Which is part of the point, right? That
keep them
when you're really young, you're innocent,
Yeah.
and then as you come into adulthood, suddenly the world is a darker, less hospitable place. You didn't talk about Anne Rice.
We did not talk about Anne Rice, because she changed the way we think about mystical creatures,
She
not just vampires.
No.
Because the Witches series is just as phenomenal. But she kind of, I don't know, after and this is just my personal opinion as far as the Vampire Chronicles go, after Queen of the Damned, it's a 50-50 toss-up. There are a handful, there's a couple of like offshoot novels that are really good, but as far as the main storyline, the main line, it just kind of goes...
It fizzles.
Yeah, it fizzles. Queen of the Damned, she should have stopped at Queen of the Damned.
But I'm wondering where the serious novel's going to go. So the openly literary novel, not the pop novel, but the openly literary novel, the one that says, "Look at me, I'm designed for a seminar course." Like DeLillo.
Well,
like
and
Pynchon,
like Cormac McCarthy
Cormac
and
McCarthy.
Pynchon and
That's right.
Who wrote Remains of the Day? What's his name?
Oh, Jesus. I don't remember. I'm not even going to lie.
Ichiro
Suzuki? No, that's a baseball player. That's a baseball player.
Yeah. No, I'm wrong name. Damn it. I can't remember. Anyway, he won the Nobel Prize a couple years ago.
He did.
Why DeLillo and McCarthy have not is the subject of another podcast eventually. But no, I think the novel is... The interesting thing is the length of the novel has kind of gone through different evolutions throughout history.
It's shorter now.
It is shorter now. Here's the thing, though, and this is what still, to me, is the most impressive. When we talk about... bringing it back to Gatsby. When we talk about the great American novel, we're talking about Gatsby, right? It is short and it is fast.
It is.
That book moves at a clip and there's not a lot to it. It's a very short novel. Whereas if you look at For Whom the Bell Tolls, that thing moves at a moderate pace and it's long.
It's a big book.
It's a big book.
Well,
The fact that he sold so many copies is amazing.
Farewell to Arms is what, 300 pages?
Farewell to Arms, yeah, it's just under 300.
Sunset Rises is one of his shorter ones, too.
Yeah. But it's even that's like, that clocks in around 250, right?
250, 260.
Yeah. But For Whom the Bell Tolls is 500 fucking pages.
Yeah, that's unusual for
all
its
the
time.
All the King's Men were like 657, somewhere in there.
But those two are outliers.
Yeah.
Because most of Faulkner's clocks in around between 200 and 400.
Yeah. Well, the same thing with Vonnegut.
Yeah.
So.
But I don't know that the big novel's on its way back anytime soon.
No, I don't think so either. I think the brevity of the novel, I think, is going to stay. Although, if you look at pop novels, they're getting thicker.
They are.
But I think there's a reason for that.
But I think an audience has less patience with a novel playing with language over a long period of time than they do a pop novel that just tells a straight story over a long period of time.
Yeah.
It's hard to get lost in a serious novel.
Yeah.
Because the novelist continues to remind you this is a novel.
Yeah.
Faulkner won't let you forget it.
Yeah.
It's very consciously about being a novel.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Okay, well, that was the novel in an hour and 8 minutes.
I think we covered a lot.
I think we did too. But we got Gatsby in there. That's all I care about. And you got your stupid Gravity's Rainbow. I hate that book.
I've never read it, so
Screaming
came across the sky. I've never read it. I've bought it. I've had a copy of it forever, and every year I'm like, "This is the year." It's kind of like with
me and Ulysses.
Mine too. This is the year. I'm going to do it this year, and then December 31st rolls around, and I say, "Next year is going to be the year."
Now, to be fair, I've read a majority of Ulysses.
I've started like 10 times.
Yeah.
And it's good. I like it.
I had to.
I like it.
I didn't have a choice.
What I've read, I've enjoyed, because he's playing with a lot of things. But that's, again, we could talk about that for another hour.
Yeah. Well, still, in my opinion, of the stream of conscious writers, the big ones, Wolfe, Joyce, Faulkner.
Faulkner's the best.
Faulkner owns them.
Yeah.
Now, see, okay, now let's talk about Quentin real quick.
Oh my God.
Now, I want this on recording
We're
so
almost out, yeah.
I can reflect back on this. Quentin's chapter. So Benji's chapter is stream of consciousness, right? But what's actually happening? Benji's bouncing.
Yep.
Present to past, past to present, right?
Yep.
Quentin's is a straight linear narrative. His stream of consciousness. He's not bouncing. Not like Benji. Because when Quentin remembers Dalton Amos, it's a memory. Mm-hmm. Benji is living those moments with each one.
That's right.
So which one's actually the ghost? I'm telling you, man, Quentin's dead before that novel starts. He's dead in That Evening Sun.
I'm wondering what Faulkner would say about this idea. He'd probably deny it.
The other thing with Absalom, the only people that talk to him in Absalom is Rosa Coldfield, who sees ghosts.
Yep. And Shreve.
And when he's talking to Shreve is all covered, the Canadian is all covered up, and Quentin is in a t-shirt and his boxers. The kid from the South.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't. It's 25 degrees in that room. Why is he covered up?
Well, there you go. You got it on tape.
I got it on tape. That's Dr. J. I'm the barber. Peace.
Now it's time for Dr. J.